Welcome, everybody, to our NFT Portal AMA with Idan. My name is X1 the Gamer. Thank you very much for being here. We're live on YouTube, so if this is your first time on YouTube, welcome. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here. We have Upland updates here. We do these AMAs here. Anything and everything you need to know about Upland happens here on the YouTube channel. Again, I'm joined by co-founder Idan Zuckerman. Thank you very much, Idan, for joining us today for this NFT Portal AMA.
Thanks for having me, David.
Real quick, I do just want to go over numbers of total blockchain hero cards that have been imported into Upland via the NFT portal. We did just launch the NFT portal a few weeks ago, and so far to date, we have 1,958 cards that have been imported into Upland via the NFT portal. And out of those, 30 have been the special Block Explorer edition cards where users have been able to import these Block Explorers. So those are great numbers. This is a new feature, and we're really excited to talk about it today. With that, let's jump into our first question. Users did submit these questions, everybody, via our Reddit thread, and we'll also be taking questions live here on YouTube. So submit your question in chat and we'll be sure to get to it. Our first question comes from DJ Shorts. And he says, what utility will come from NFTs uploaded through the NFT portal?
Yeah, and that's pretty much, hitting the nail on the head right from the get-go. So, we are excited to have this really new and innovative feature out. And again, this feature serves to demonstrate the technical aspect of it. But like DJ Short says, what about the utility? And we have a big vision to what utility this brings to the Upland metaverse, but just in general to the blockchain/crypto metaverses ecosystem in general. And when we look at the kind of like the utilities with the big vision of this, we kind of like put it into 4 different buckets. And I think the first bucket, which is really exciting, is about the ability to trade different NFTs from different sources and different blockchains of origin within the same transaction. Now, imagine for a second, if I maybe own, maybe a CryptoKitty and maybe an F1 racer outside of Upland, and maybe David, you own a cool property and maybe some other NFT, I will be able to bring all of those into Upland, and then we can make that transaction in a single click of a button where these NFTs of different origins just exchange ownership. Now, this is something that has never been done yet in the NFT space, and we're going to be the first one implementing this thing. And again, keep in mind, all of that things happen with very low friction as kind of like a consumer experience. Right, so all of that is done without the need necessarily to have anybody interact with a specific wallet or have kind of like the blockchain currency of origins as means to exchange value. So I think this is one very exciting innovation and opportunity that the portal brings. And then the next one has to do with how this ties into our vision with businesses. Where now imagine people can operate what we call NFT galleries, which is basically shops that can allow the secondary markets for anything uploaded through the portal. And this is not just about kind of like the cool aspect of it and the gamified experience of a shop in the metaverse, but this also serves to basically expose potentially players that have NFT assets to a whole new market of players that came into the metaverse without necessarily having any kind of like affinity to, again, wallets, identities, marketplaces, etc. Keep in mind, like when we launched Upland, a couple of years ago, we have seen time and again the ability for us to onboard players who are basically gamers, who are not necessarily blockchain aficionados. And through Upland, they discovered the concepts of NFTs and blockchain in the first place. And we believe that, by exposing these businesses, these NFT galleries, this now brings in a potential market of a whole new set of person who have a really frictionless point of entry into the NFT marketplace ecosystem. So I think that's another exciting bucket of opportunities. Then the next bucket, again, we always say Upland, play, earn, connect, right? And as we start to deliver on the connect pillar, we highly see the NFTs as a huge context to socialize around. So imagine, for example, that you own NFTs and they are uploaded into your asset wallet. And now that creates a context or a point of entry where people can start interacting with each other around that NFT inside the app in Upland. Again, this is something that we envision, and this is going to be part of the connect pillar of Play, Earn, Connect that we always say in Upland. And then I think the last bucket is basically how you can also utilize these NFTs inside your expected Upland home. So we've always envisioned and are working to achieve basically an in-home experience for Upland. So we started out with just properties. Now we have properties and structures on top of them. And pretty soon people will be able to actually use their structures as their Upland homes. And then we have always envisioned that Upland homes can be decorated with anything that is, some of the native Upland tokens, but also the external upload tokens in Upland. So, for example, if I own maybe a piece of art, that exists today, maybe on Rarible, I'll be able to upload it into Upland and then maybe hang that art in my Upland home on my wall, for example. Again, that creates another context for people to actually, take pride in the assets that they own, have other Uplanders view the NFTs that they own, and again, maybe interact with them through that experience of in-homes. So this is basically the 4 different buckets. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of use cases that we haven't even imagined of how people kind of like utilize the portal and utilize their assets inside of Upland. But to me, that's a big, exciting point for the future of how Upland starts transitioning from just kind of like a game and the metaverse into a true platform.
Yeah, thank you very much, DJ Shorts, for asking that question. We do have a couple comments in chat. Future G40 says that sounds actually kind of cool, and Majestic Lion says that's amazing, and it is. It's very exciting. With that, you talked a little bit about businesses, and this is a question that we get all the time. When are businesses coming to Upland?
Yeah, so again, we're still holding true to our the sequence of delivery as we communicated it, albeit it's being a bit delayed for different reasons. And the first businesses that are going to debut are going to be the Block Explorer shops as part of the business beta. This is still expected to come within 2021. But I can expand and say that now the way we are delivering it, that type of business will also serve as the infrastructure for other types of businesses such as NFT galleries. So when we deliver that first type of businesses and we launch that beta with our a group of beta business owners, we are expecting that very soon thereafter we'll be able to deploy more types of businesses using that same infrastructure.
Very cool. Our next question comes from City Runner. City Runner writes in and says, what is the timeline and general idea behind the mechanics on how the portal will work between users? And will non-Upland players be able to access these NFTs?
Yeah, if I'm understanding the question correctly, then in order to access an uploaded asset in Upland, you will need an Upland identity. So this is without an Upland identity, you don't have in the background a respective blockchain identity. And again, to be able to kind of like trade NFTs at the end of the day, you'd have to have that blockchain presence associated. So again, there may be, it's not technically impossible to create situations where people who signed in as guests can still view the NFTs and see them in Upland, but they're not going to be able to trade them unless they have an Upland identity. And I hope that covers the intention behind the question.
Yeah, I think
if not, people can comment on the YouTube thread.
Yeah, I think it does. Our next question comes from Collectabytes, who apparently is an OG player. Welcome, Collectabytes. Thank you for submitting that. Collectabytes writes in and says, will we be able to list our Upland properties on places like OpenSea? And if so, will they be labeled with what the property is, i.e. a young museum or iconic collection property?
Yeah, so again, taking a step back, we do have a vision in place. So we have today the upload token, meaning we can take an NFT from outside of Upland and upload it into Upland. That being said, when it's in there, there's also going to be the option to recall it back to the to reclaim it back to the blockchain of origin. So that action, we call it like reclaiming a token back to where it came from. But then further down the road, we're envisioning something that we are going to call the download token. So now, if you have a native NFT in Upland, so it could be a property or a property with a structure, or maybe a car in Upland, then we do envision that after having been KYC'd, and people know how that process looks like today with the fiat open beta, the property to USD open beta that is currently running. So after having been KYC'd, we want to offer the opportunity for players, if they choose to download their native Upland tokens back into other target blockchains, such as if they want to list them in places like OpenSea or other marketplaces. So this is something we are envisioning and are going to work on. This is not something that's going to come in 2021. Hopefully, maybe it's somewhere around 2022, but definitely something we're going to work towards and create that freedom for all Uplanders to basically do what they want with their NFTs.
Very cool. Shimiya in YouTube chat says, will people be able to sell their assets for currency other than UPX?
Yes, so secondary marketplaces, which are basically the NFT galleries, are going to offer the option to sell NFTs for US dollars and not just UPX. So to that question, yes, items can be sold in the secondary market for either UPX or US dollars.
Great question. Thanks, Shimiya. Our next question comes from Crypticon, who writes in and says, when will we be able to swap BCH cards with other players in game? And when will we be able to put those cards in a house? Also, what will be the point of doing this?
Yes. Again, having the ability to trade NFTs of the same type within Upland between players, very similar to how properties are done that way today. This is something that we're going to give a very high priority for. So this is going to be one of the early utilities that we want to kind of like put in place. But then we don't want to stop at that. So it's just not Blockchain Hero for Blockchain Hero. We also want to why not allow Blockchain Hero for an explorer, or Blockchain Hero for a property, or 3 Blockchain Heroes for whatever, 5 cars, or the other way around, or whatever. So that is something that we consider as pretty low hanging fruit, and a very, very important utilities that will kind of like push us forward with what we're able to offer to all Uplanders. And I will say though that as we kind of like evolve, we are imagining and envisioning more elaborate mechanics about what is how you can perform that trade. So for example, if you want to make a swap between 2 players, we may want to make sure that these players are in the same city, or kind of like virtually close to each other in the metaverse. Or maybe, if they are not, maybe you can leave it in the other person's apartment in the other city where you're close to. So by that, for example, we will achieve both. Again, we constantly keep trying to enhance the concept of virtual locality, and why it is important for you to be in one place versus the other in the Upland metaverse. But also that can, again, drive a lot of utility for why you would want to, for example, own an apartment in a different city, not necessarily that you live in. So all of these mechanics are going to be kind of like cast into, as we evolve, into these trading rules that kind of like support both person-to-person trading, and still also support those secondary market businesses that kind of like operate as direct marketplaces.
Excellent. Speaking of properties, there's a question in YouTube chat about properties. Matt Noise Foam wants to know, will we be able to merge properties to create larger or more unique properties?
Yeah, that's a question we basically have, I think, in every AMA.
Yeah, it's true.
And again, the long-term vision, we don't see why not. It seems very logical that if you own 2 adjacent properties, you can merge them. It is not very high on our priority list in terms of execution. So this is not something to be expected, for example, in 2021.
Okay. We did get, when we talked about businesses, we got a couple business questions, if you don't mind going over those real quick from YouTube chat. Sure. Scooby wrote in and said, what type of requirements will there be for future businesses? For instance, parks for nurseries, car dealerships for car businesses, etc.
Yeah, sorry. So when you say requirements, again, there are so there are going to be different types of businesses. Each business is going to be unique. And again, as the person rightfully mentioned, car dealerships are going to be where people trade cars in the secondary market. And again, NFT galleries is where people trade, upload any uploaded NFT in the metaverse. Again, nurseries, once we have the concepts of life, hopefully with the future STEM token, and we want to grow trees and do like lawns for our properties, that's where you'll get those. So yeah, every business is going to be specialized and dedicated to some kind of like a purpose in the metaverse. And then in order for you to operate it, again, we're trying to achieve, again, we've mentioned a lot of time the concept of business license. That concept is evolving as we're trying to find the best fit for how to make it work. And there are basically two drivers for that, the way we look at it. One is we want to make sure that whoever runs a business is actually involved and actually participates and works towards the goal of having an active business, right? So again, we want to avoid a situation where everybody just opens any type of business just because they can, and that creates too many businesses that have too less value in each locale. So we're kind of like focusing in today on the final mechanisms of how to operate these business license that give you the right to start operating a business. But we want to try to achieve a situation where anybody who actually wants to start a business, it's not hard to do, right? So we're finalizing these concepts today. We're going to have more information as we get to the rollout of businesses that require business licenses. But again, I think we have some very good directions and how to make it both easy for people to start businesses, but to make sure that it requires people to keep operating them to remain open.
Yeah, and will those business licenses be tied to the real world map? So for instance, if you have a car dealership, does it have to be on a car dealership property?
No, no.
Our next question comes from Ka943. He says, will we be able to purchase NFTs in the Upland store in game versus only being able to access them via Wax or Atomic Hub right now?
Sure. So again, we are separating here between Upland native NFTs and NFTs that have been imported from other blockchains. So anything imported, no, those will never be sold in the Upland store. Those will only be probably sold in secondary markets via NFT galleries. But again, NFTs that are native to Upland, right? Those could absolutely and will be sold in the stores. And we're also working to introduce bundles and kind of like sort of like these pack mechanics where you can buy and you get different types of NFTs native to Upland when you kind of like instead of just buying one to one. So absolutely anything that is native to Upland, yes, will be accessible in its primary markets inside of Upland, but also through the Upland store.
Very cool. Real quick in chat, I'm seeing quite a few people mentioning that they're struggling to connect their wallet and hook up to the NFT portal. If you have any questions, feel free to write into support. Also, head over to our Discord channel. A link is actually right below this video. There's the new player channel. There's also the NFT portal channel where other players will help you get everything figured out. We also have a YouTube video right here on this channel that will walk you through how to set up the NFT portal in game. So make sure, again, there's lots of resources out there. Again, feel free to write us and we can get you taken care of. Dapper Switch writes in and wants to know, will you work with artists to release limited series NFT artwork?
Yeah, so this is something we have done in the past, and again, I don't see why we won't do it again in the future. So again, it may not be with the Upland native token, but now with the portal, there's a lot of opportunity to do these sort of things. And by the way, just to mention, that's something now that, again, with the addition, with the right integration and the opening of the NFT galleries, now that's something that actual Uplanders can do and not necessarily us as operators, right? You can operate an NFT gallery, collaborate now with an artist that maybe is used to work on Ethereum in other marketplaces, and then bring in their work and do that together with them. So again, it's about giving those tools and empowering not just us to do that, but everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Pugs04 writes in and says, are there any plans for providing staking rewards to any NFTs that we portal into Upland?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, I know we've these basically, let's call it economic incentive mechanism have been popular in some games and some other kind of like examples. And we have taken a hard look at those. And I think there's a couple of things to be cognizant of here. One is basically, I mean, when somebody does something like that, what are we doing basically? We are creating some kind of value, which is usually based on inflating whatever type of currency. So in Upland's case, it may be Apex or it may be Spark, right? So you're going to be creating more of that currency to incentivize bringing in NFTs. And also the first question is going to be, why are you doing it, right? So is there an alignment with incentivizing? So when we take a look at Upland, again, we don't have an interest or any specific reason why to get players to just bring in their NFTs to Upland for the sake of bringing them in. So that's the first kind of like misalignment for why we would, consider, very, very diligently before implementing these types of kind of like economic rewards, because that is not sustainable in the long term if you don't have a full alignment of why to do it. The way we look at it is we much rather cast actual utility and give people actual reasons for why to bring in those NFTs. So again, bring in your NFT because you want to trade it for another type of NFT and you can't do it anywhere else. Bring in your NFT because you're operating a business and you want to put fantastic kind of like inventory in your business. Bring in because you want to collaborate with other Uplanders and talk about that NFT inside of Upland, or you want to display it in your home. This is why we want you to bring in your NFT. And kind of like we're trying to not create these, I wouldn't call them fake, because again, they're in some cases they can be perfectly valid as a means to incentivize players. But we're trying to cast in actual utility that will be the reason for people to import their NFTs, and not necessarily for the sake of creating inflated value. And I hope that makes sense. Again, it's a very complicated topic, I think. But again, we are always measuring these types of things in the long-term economic effect it can have on our economy in the metaverse.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Boydern over on YouTube writes in and says, any news on when the Spark exchange will come live?
Yeah, we unfortunately we have not yet started to work on that actively, but it's still well in the roadmap.
Okay, let's take one more question from YouTube. Human Simulation says, will we see players being able to sell 3D models of buildings to players in a property store where a player can sell the model that they made?
Yeah, this is absolutely something we're thinking about. And again, the whole concept of user-generated content in terms of building models, again, this is something we touched upon very, very lightly with the previous community challenge we had. And we had some fantastic results. And I think, again, the next step is going to be for us to imagine how people can create their own models and make them available kind of like for other Uplanders as well to utilize. But we want to kind of like marry that with the first concepts of self-governance in Upland. For example, how would different neighborhoods decide whether or not they want to allow these models to be built in their neighborhoods, for example? So again, this is something we're kind of like actively thinking about and working towards. And then at the end of the day, I see no reason why people will not be able to run businesses that are basically architect shops, right? And offer their own models. Again, everything in Upland is going to, again, because we want to kind of like maintain that visual coherence of how the metaverse looks externally, then all of these will have to kind of like need to be approved by the team. But then once approved, these could be things that people actually, make a business out of.
Let's take one more question from YouTube. Just off topic of the NFT portal. This is a question we get all the time in AMAs as well about Spark mining. Dr. TID says Spark mining was to be in Cleveland, as you've previously stated. Can we please have an update on how this will work?
I'm not sure about the reference to Cleveland as it relates to Spark mining. Spark mining in general is a vision we've had from in the earliest days of kind of like conceiving the metaverse. And the idea was that these resources, so currently, again, the resources that we have communicated until now was Spark, which was already launched, a resource that basically you need to stake in order to build anything inanimate in the external world of Upland. And then the other one we've communicated was something that we currently temporarily call STEM, which is basically a resource that's going to be used to create anything that has to do with life. So you can imagine, again, trees and parks, and pets. Maybe one day you'll be able to breed horses and I don't know, raise your cat in Upland. Hopefully that's a distant vision that we are going to be working to achieve. And then for each of these resources, we imagine Spark to be something that you mine for in the metaverse, basically in places that are non-urban. And then STEM is something that we imagine that will be farmed in basically in farmlands. So we're not yet in a position that we can realize that vision for how you get access to Spark and STEM as it relates to mining and farming. We are going to work actively together because we feel that this is a very cool, distinct, and important part of gamification in the metaverse that allow people to specialize in different types of activities in Upland.
Very good. Thanks everybody for leaving your questions in Upland chat. Again, if you have any issues linking up to the portal, we have a tutorial here on YouTube. Come join us on Discord. Reach out to support. We have a variety of resources and can help you link up your NFT portal. Harry Princess writes in and says, "When will all NFT cars from Crypto Motors be importable?"
Okay, that's a great question, and maybe I want to have a small clarification because I've seen this kind of like maybe point of slight confusion appear from time to time. We have announced that we have a collaboration with the guys from Crypto Motors, and we're collaborating basically to design our first set of native car NFTs in Upland. We are branding this Meta. So this is kind of like the brand we're going to use for this, and it's going to be a limited run, and these are going to be the first cars that appear in Upland. We're talking about a series, I think there are 9 models in general. So we're talking about a sports car, a sedan, an SUV, a pickup truck, a van, and a full-size truck. And these are going to be all the models that are going to be launched with this collaboration. Again, Crypto Motors' part in this collaboration is primarily designing these cars. So these are like very proficient real-world car designers. Some of them worked for Lamborghini and other kind of like cool brands, like real-world brands. And we are creating these like high-fidelity, very realistic, although albeit also with some futuristic elements as well, line of cars. But all of these are going to be Upland native NFTs. So these are going to be cars that live in Upland. They're a 3D model, and they're not just collectibles. They are going to be also will serve as utility to transport yourself from one city to another via the car. And then later on, hopefully in 2022, they're going to be kind of like things like car races and other utilities around those cars. So this is a very highly specialized NFT that is very relevant and usable inside of Upland. Now, as it relates to external cars, so you can think about like crypto motor cars on Ethereum, or you can also think about F1 racers, etc. So when you import this through the portal, right, they are not going to become native cars in Upland. You can still do them if you want to trade them in galleries, etc., but they are not going to serve as functional cars in Upland, at least not in the early stages. I do envision that if somehow down the road we do have an official partnership with maybe Formula One or other partners, then we can make that bridge that creates these kind of like manifestations of the native Upland car NFT when bringing those in. But the point is, it does require special integration. Whereas if you just want to upload something for the sake of trading it or displaying it in your home, etc., that will still be doable via the portal in its default state.
Very cool. And I don't know if you can show us today, but do you have any samples of cars? If not,
yeah, I mean, I'm let's leave that for another day.
Okay, guys, I tried. Guys.
I do. So I do have samples, and I think I have actually tweeted one vision of the SUV concept. We have kind of like almost finalized 3 models by now, which is the sports car, the SUV, and the sedan. And I would love to share that, but I kind of like I wanted to do it like right, like with the high fidelity and kind of like so people get excited. So, but it's exciting. I mean, I think one of the things I did not imagine, right, was to be able to just participate and listen in on the process of designing cars in general that are realistic cars. So if I could say that to my 8-year-old self, right, that this is one of the things I will be doing, I think that 80-year-old would have had a kick out of it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's exciting. So with that, Harry Princess also writes in and just wants to know, will there ever be a time when we import an NFT block explorer that will enable stuff like first person view, or you enable the block, you import the block explorer and you can control it with your keyboard, the direction that it goes, stuff like that?
Yeah, so a couple of things to unwrap here. So first of all, first-person view for Block Explorer sounds like a fantastic, utility in Upland. Very exciting, and I think it probably ties back. So we are again a bit for the longer term, and especially as it relates to things like car racing, we are envisioning the transition to client technologies that utilize Unity as opposed to the current web technologies that we use. I think once we're there, things like giving a first-person view from your block explorer is something that's going to be actually tangible and makes a lot of sense and sounds a lot of fun. So that's in that aspect. In terms of block explorer's movement, again, as we communicated in the past, at some point we're going to transition our movement mechanics to what we call true movement speed, especially as it relates to more means of moving around the metaverse via vehicles, etc. And then those mechanics will change, and there may be better ways for you to control the movement of your explorer. Until then, though, we do not imagine changing currently the current mechanics of controlling your explorer, which are primarily based on the usage of other properties or your own properties to move around the city.
We got a question in chat here on YouTube. Matt Bias wrote in just regarding the cars that we just talked about. He says, will there be parking lots to camp the cars so they don't wander aimlessly?
Yeah, so cars, as they are envisioned today, when they're introduced, they will have to be parked on one of the owner's properties. Okay, and that absolutely opens up the very low-hanging fruit of people offering their properties as services for other people to park on. Okay, that is something totally possible, but cars will never be detached. They will always have to be present on a specific property, other than the times they're being used. For example, for traveling between cities or for racing, etc.
Very cool. YK2012 writes in and says, if I create an in-game business to sell my NFTs, how will Upland provide me the tools needed to advertise and market my business? How will people know my shop exists?
Yeah, great question. And so I think at the very basic level, the businesses will be discoverable in Upland via some kind of listings, or you can imagine features like, okay, I'm in a certain city, show me the businesses around me, or something like that, right? But there won't be active advertising of the players' businesses. So there's not going to be a way for owners, at least at the beginning, to, let's say, buy an ad in Upland and advertise their business through pop-ups or interstitials or whatever. And I think this is exactly where now the owners come in, where they have the responsibility, again, to engage with the community, to use Discord, to make a great offering and go out and advertise it, maybe even to get players from outside of Upland to go directly to their store, and that's maybe their point of entry to Upland in the first place. But there's going to be a lot of responsibility on the shoulders of business owners to basically operate and advertise their businesses. I will say that one important distinction maybe is landmarks. So if you remember, landmarks are discoverable from a very high zoom level on the map, and that's one of the kind of like their desirability points for why people would want to own them. So again, you can operate a business from within a landmark, and that has some kind of like a discoverability advantages compared to businesses that are operated from ordinary structures.
So with it being up to, its players got to do the legwork to get their name out there. We've talked in the past and past AMAs about in-game communication, cafes, voice chat. Is there a time frame that we have on that coming?
I can tell that we see the Connect pillar as a very major pillar that has been probably today up until now has not had the the attention that it deserves. So we are going to be actively allocating resources to kind of like beef up the Connect part of it. Part of it will be those cafes that are still definitely on the roadmap and waiting to be executed. And then another part of it will be just bringing more communication points into the game where people can actually talk with other players, and not just one-to-one, but maybe around different contexts. You can imagine like a Discord-like experience, only that happens inside the game.
Excellent. Professor Scooby writes in and says, what is the time frame on being able to withdraw our NFTs back through the portal?
Yeah, I would say definitely, absolutely 2021, but even more than that, I would assume that it will be, in the next month or so. So this is something. The only thing was we did not want to delay the introduction of the NFT portal until we had the download. Not the download, but the reclaim feature. So that's why we kind of like released it early, sans the reclaim functionality. The reclaim functionality is going to follow suit pretty soon.
And then Professor, he also writes, with that, will other blockchains like Ethereum, and we've talked about this a little bit, but we can hit on it again, come in the future? And if so, when?
If absolutely yes, when, that will be highly tied to the amount of utility we feel comfortable with, because again, we don't want to introduce those integrations and then have people import NFTs but have nothing to do with them. Again, I want to reiterate, we don't have any desire to get NFTs into Upland that don't have business being there or don't have like any utility attached to them.
Very cool. Origin541 writes in and says, people need wax. Will you incorporate wax rewards into Upland?
No.
Okay. And then let's take one more question or a couple questions as we finish out. We're about 10 minutes out, guys. Again, thank you everybody for joining us in today's AMA about the NFT portal. We've also covered some other topics, including this one, which I've seen come up in chat a couple times. This is from Human Simulation again. He says, I'm still curious about how self-governance is going to work. Are we talking city mayors and district representatives, city ordinances, zoning restrictions? What's the vision there?
Yeah, so again, there's no written plan yet. We've always envisioned self-governance as something we definitely want to inject into the metaverse to start giving players more controls over their current surrounding. But again, I can give like maybe a window to our thought process and how we think about it. And again, I can iterate again how, for example, we see players in a neighborhood deciding, for example, which type of user-generated structures can or cannot be built in that neighborhood, right? So maybe if somebody, designs a warehouse and wants to add that as a user-generated, model to participate in the metaverse, a neighborhood can decide, we don't want warehouses in our neighborhood. We just want whatever, this and that type of homes in there. So that could be one potential example of how self-governance is applied. Another something that we're thinking about is, again, self-governance as it relates to businesses that operate. Like, again, which type of businesses and how many businesses per city. And again, self-governance doesn't have to be predefined to its to kind of like its area of effect, because again, the way we are thinking about it, pretty soon, hopefully, players will be able to dedicate their official Upland home address in Upland. And it is one address per one player, even if that player owns multiple buildings throughout the country or the world. Okay, so there is going to be one official residence, and that will dictate where your voting rights are. And then you can imagine whenever you vote on any type of self-governed, point or technicality, that can then, depending on what you're voting on, may apply to either a street, a neighborhood, a city, a country. Again, it's not limited. So every vote will be in the context of what you're voting on to determine, the scope of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Human Simulation. Thank you very much. Let's take one more question here. Lurking Ferret, and I've seen a couple people mention this, but they want to know, is there any update on beneficiaries or setting aside beneficiaries in Upland?
There is no update yet, unfortunately. But a great question, because again, this is some of the things we've been envisioning from the earliest days of Upland.
Yeah, very, very cool. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Idan, for taking the time to go over some of the details of the NFT portal and the future of the NFT portal. I think this is a big deal. Upland's the only place that this is happening right now, so it's very exciting. It's an exciting time. Any last words you have to say about the NFT portal and to the Upland people?
No, I would just say, I hope we've been able with this release to communicate, or at least the vision of the possibilities to come. Again, the utility will come in lockstep with these releases, and then to be followed by other integrations and more activity around NFT portal and how it affects the metaverse. So again, hopefully we've been able to communicate that vision and create, I think, the excitement that is absolutely due. And I hope everybody is excited about the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much, everybody, again. Don't forget, join us in Discord if you haven't. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't. And we'll see you guys on our next AMA. Thanks.